diagnosis in late 2019 must have come as such a tremendous shock.
But it wasn't really a shock. It was like, okay, my wife and was very upset. But I wasn't that upset. I thought, I've done so much with my life. I've done what most people will do in 3 lifetimes.
Thank you again for joining us, Oscar Chalipsky. Lunch with Pippa Hudson.
Every weekday,
1 till 3.
only on Cape Talk.
Join the conversation.
If you're ready for warmer weather to get here, don't worry because Emporia will get you through the last of the winter chills. Stay cozy with 50% off with a spring in your step with half price on selected CBD oil. Visit the Westlake store or order online at emporium.co.za. Emporium, it's better.
Is your car still under warranty? Did you know that you can now choose where you have it serviced without the warranty being compromised? Don't let your next service cost an arm and a leg. At Auto Works, you get original parts with a 60,000 kilometer 1-year warranty and workmanship as good as the agents. To keep your car maintained according to the original manufacturer specifications, visit autoworks.co.za. Autoworks. We make autos work.
I've never seen such a thing of beauty. What a gold. It glistens in the morning sun, brings everything around it to life. Oh, what a sight. There really is nothing like a fresh coat of paint. Thanks to Decro Paints, with their specialized colors, any Pantone you can think of, and their diverse range of decorative interior and exterior products. We're talking slick, stylish, leading looks by the distributor with the biggest variety of paint, coatings, and resins. For inspiration, like Decro Paints on Facebook, and bring your paint to life. Don't let your cash flow slow down your business. Old Mutual can help you bridge the cash flow gap with funding based on your unpaid invoices. Use your invoices to improve your cash flow through Old Mutual Corporate Ventures, so you can focus on running your business. Get ahead of life with invoice funding facilitated by Old Mutual Corporate Ventures. Visit oldmutual.co.za to find out more. Old Mutual. Do great things every day. Old Mutual Corporate Ventures is a company within the Old Mutual Group of Companies. T's and C's apply.
You're with Cape Talk.
You're with Cape Talk.
40 minutes to 10 o'clock. Deaths linked to COVID 19 have apparently left 150,000 children in South Africa. These are the figures that were released in the modeling by Imperial College London as well of a global reference group looking into the effects post a COVID 19 lockdown. Of course, the global health emergency still continues. According to the United Nations, these figures of young children being left orphaned due to deaths from COVID 19 simply reiterates the importance of a child centered response to the broader impact of COVID 19 on childhood and particularly when it comes to protecting children and supporting children. Patrick Renati is the National Director of the SOS Children's and joins us now on the line. These are very, very worrying statistics. 150,000 children have now been left orphaned due to COVID 19 related deaths. Patrick, from your organization that deals in the space of supporting particularly children who are left vulnerable due to death or neglect, have you seen an increase over the last while of children being put in touch with your organization, being either a primary caregiver or even in both parents having passed away due to COVID 19 related illness?
Good morning, Lester. Good morning also to your listeners. I must just start off by appreciating this opportunity and also saying that you sound a little bit faint, but I heard the question. Yes, I can confirm that as SOS Children's Villages, whose task it is to build and provide care for children in need, where we help them to shape their lives and their own future, we have experienced this increase of children who need our care. At some point in our facility, which is a family-like care facility in places like Mamelodi, you would find that at one go, during COVID, you got 14, placements of children, because what was happening was that the the local care facilities that normally could look after these children could no longer cope with the numbers, because parents were either sick or dying, or some of them were just abandoning the children because of poverty. They couldn't cope with the responsibilities. And so through the DSD, then many of these children would be placed in our care. I mean, we would have, for example, 10 children being placed per quarter onto the onto each of our 8 programs that we run across the country. So the situation is really, really sad and bad, and because poverty, as well as the normal drivers of children leaving their homes, things like domestic violence, family breakdowns, unemployment, and so on. When you put on top of that COVID and its damaging effect on the economy and the families, then you had a real serious problems on our hands.
Well, we've had this focus on the short, medium, and long term impact, economic impact on lockdown and COVID 19. We've had focuses on the individual mental health impact of COVID 19 and the lockdown, but has there really been a concerted consideration of what the impact of COVID 19, the lockdown, the economics around it, or even simply just the death and illnesses associated with that pandemic, whether we can quantify or whether we can map what that impact will have on the long term lot of not only the 150,000 children now left orphaned, but collectively as our society here in South Africa, we're each, and you're very, very lucky if you've not been impacted by a COVID 19 related death. I certainly have many times over the last 2 years. Have we been able to model or quantify what that family impact of death will be on South Africa and our families?
Man, I don't think we have been able to do that. And I don't think this is a problem for South Africa because of the long-term nature of the pandemic. You see, no system, no public or institutional system prepared for what was going to come, just on the ordinary working professionals and people. And it's even worse on people that are poor, unemployed, already deep into abject poverty. So it does appear to me that what UNICEF has done and these other groups that are trying to really quantify scientifically what the impact is, I think it's work that has to be welcomed. In fact, SOS Children Villages, as well as UNICEF and the AU, as well as the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, has found that the situation of children without parental care is on the rise in Africa. It was on the rise even before COVID-19. So what has now happened is that the impact of that has now suddenly sort of gained speed. So I think what we're trying to do as different organizations that are working in this field are then trying to look behind this trail of destruction, what the impact really is. And my sense is that it's going to take a long time before we can really understand it. Now, we can look at it at the level of a child or of the family. And you, as you said correctly, that at the level of the child, there's been a lot of mental health issues, loss of parental care, loss, deepening poverty, and all of that. But if you then have to look at the overall impact on all the sectors of society, if I understood your question correctly, I feel that there's still a long way for us to really quantify the impact. But organizations like us, SOS Children's Villages, do not have the luxury of understanding fully the bigger picture. we now have to deal with what is happening now when we see the demand for our services and the reduction in the resources to provide those services. When I talk about resources, I'm talking about money, where, for example, people that used to donate to us, they themselves were impacted by this, and companies where they were impacted. So what you now have, you've got this trajectory which is going up of the demand and the capacity to supply the services that would meet that demand being diminished by insufficient resources in terms of money and other resources that we can think about.
I'd like to believe, and I'm sure you do offer psychosocial assistance, counseling, trauma counseling for all children who are affected by loss and experiencing grief. There, of course, we live in a country with a high rate of interpersonal violence, and that often results in the deaths of people who are parents. But is the counseling different? Or is there a different approach when we talk about so many children having lost parents or caregivers over this last 2-3 years? Is the approach different in how you offer that psychosocial support, that trauma and grief counseling? How do you start talking to a child who has been struck by one, two parents who have passed away due to COVID-19? What's the discussion that you
Fortunately, Lester, we've got trained counselors, people that are trained and updated in terms of how to deal with traumatic experiences as and their impact on children. So, and then they are able to have those conversations about. You see, the situation there is that it's not just the child who's going through this, but the personal trauma, but is also the added trauma of loss of all these other normal support systems. So what then happens is part of the conversation is to deal and debrief the child in terms of what they are feeling, what they are going through, how are they thinking about what has just happened, but to also give hope that if now that we are here at SOS Student Villages, you are coming into a family like. So as much as you are dealing with the nature and the gravity of the problem, but at the same time within that conversation, you are showing that life may have treated you badly, may have given you a bad hand, but where you are now at SOS, we are your family. We are not going to be as your mother and father in that natural sense, but we provide all the kind of extra support away from just family-like care. You have other siblings, you've got your capacity to go to school, medication, food, and all of those kinds of things. So what then the discussion becomes, it becomes also, as much as it has to deal with the trauma, but it also has to provide hope so that the child can feel that there is still care in society, there is still protection, even if it's not my biological family.
Well, one would expect that our extended families, our aunts, uncles, even grandparents, then take up. We lost Patrick. So that's another call coming in.
I'm here.
But I'm very, very glad. I have one more question. One expects that the extended family, the aunts, the uncles, the grandparents, will then step in and take over those responsibilities. Why isn't that not so? Is that also because of families are already struggling financially, emotionally, particularly financially, that adding one or two more children to a family unit, taking up responsibilities, is just too much of a burden, and therefore the assistance is then asked of a state system or organization like SOS Children's Homes. Where's the extended families to unfortunately take up this responsibility in this respect?
Lester, all these issues that you mentioned now are applicable, but an additional factor to think about is if you're talking about urban migration, where the extended family is not in the township or is not in the informal settlement. The grandparents are out there, the other aunt is there, and so on. So families are no longer as in the same place where you could actually provide care. So when this force of poverty and dysfunction and economic impact happens in this family that is now alone here without that extended support system, then it creates a huge impact such that some parents themselves sort of get into a depressive situation such that they cannot care for their children themselves. Others get into situations of drugs and alcohol abuse and all those kinds of things. So it's a multiplicity of factors that have broken down the Ubuntu model that we had in Africa. The model where it says, even if it's not my biological child, I can look at them. The socio-economic conditions where the majority of the people migrate to do not lend themselves so well in such a way that other people can now step in because they themselves are going through their own issues. So this factor here is really, really needing a lot of thinking from our policy people. How do you create an environment in the country where families and individuals can thrive, can get work, can really be able to look after themselves, and they are not at the mercy of the economic environment that has now been created in our country.
Patrick Galati, your email address or your website is sossouthafrica.org.za, because of course, as you said, more and more NGOs, family support organizations, a lot of that funding has come down to a trickle as other people, donors have other priorities, corporates have other priorities. Is that the website people can go to maybe assist children's villages?
Yes, it's www.sossouthafrica.org.za.
Patrick Kulati is National Director of SOS Children's Villages. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Cheers.
Just after 10 o'clock coming up, remember, special guest at 11 o'clock, Steve Newman, founding member of the Nanas. Looking forward to talk to him also, showcasing his benefit concert tonight at the Back.